Hello and welcome back, and we're continuing our look at the QNAP 64 series. We've already talked about the 2 and the 4 bay, and this is the 6 bay, the TS-664. Now, full disclaimer straight off the bat. This is going to be quite similar to the 2 and the 4 bay, so unless you're specifically looking at the 6 bay here, you're going to hear a lot of things you've already heard before. This is their new RAID 5, RAID 6 bay system, and it arrives with a bunch of SMB stuff and Intel Celeron processor inside. And although I did kind of really give some high praise there to the 2 bay system being one of the most powerhouse 2 bays out there, this is not the most powerful 6 bay in QNAP's arsenal there. I would say this is somewhere in the middle, arriving, the price point from what I'm seeing at the time of recording hasn't been fully confirmed, but we're seeing a price dancing around that 600-700 nicker without the VAT, depending on where you are in the world. Now, before we unbox it, let's talk about a few things. This is the follow-up to the popular TS-653D, and that was in itself an Intel Celeron based system with 2.5 gigabit Ethernet there on the rear, PCIe upgradability, and 6 SATA bays there on the front. So if you already own that, or you're already considering that, as there may be a price drop knocking around on that one as the old units disappear, then why should you care about this unit? It's a valid point. You know, the architecture in this series has always been fairly repetitive, although it's been newer generations all the way through. This system, I would say, is probably the biggest leap in that series, but in ways that you can't really see. So, first and foremost, off the bat, we are looking at a system that arrives with both hard drive and SSD bays built in. Then you've got the fact that the CPU that's being utilised in here, a newer generation Celeron, or Celeron if you're me and pronouncing it wrong, that CPU brings a many more PCI lanes and its chipset to the table. Consequently, it can do a lot more broadly internally. But for now, let's see what we get for our money inside. Again, this video is being recorded at QNAP's UK offices here. It's the only way we could get hold of a lot of this hardware early. So again, that's why I don't have my nice stuff there on the background going on. So let's open up what we get inside the box here. Let's have a quick look. Okay, we have our UK mains lead, probably the most useful and dullest thing inside that box. Then we've got a box of accessories inside here. We've got information on the extended warranty there. Now, the system arrives with 3 years of manufacturer's warranty inside. And again, you can bolt on another couple of years there. It will cost you, but it's in there. We've got our quick start installation guide to set the device up for the first time, but I'll be perfectly frank with you, the online resource is probably going to be more of a friend on that one. Details on the warranty as well. Just basically a breakdown of where it's covered and how. Then we've got our external PSU here that goes inside. This system takes advantage of 120 watt external PSU. And again, I know there are mixed feelings on external PSUs. Yes, they can fall out. Yes, they're annoying. But at the same time, PSUs are the second most fragile thing inside any of these systems. Consequently, if this fails and it's inside your system, it can be a real difficult thing to get it removed, whereas this is well easy to replace. So again, I'm personally a fan of them. Also inside, we've got an Ethernet cable. It is a Cat 5e cable, which again, a number of you die-hard storage people, you're not going to be as keen on that, thinking it should be a Cat 6 or a Cat 7. But as this is a 2.5 GBE box, that's more than enough. You're not going to be able to take advantage of any of those advantages. And also inside, we've got screws for 2.5 inch and 3.5 inch media. Although, if I'm right, this is going to take advantage of click and load drives, so you're not going to need these screws. But one thing I will add off the bat, and I was kind of hoping would be inside this, and I had a suspicion about this, there isn't heat sinks. Now, why is that important? And we're going to get onto that later in the video, but unlike a lot of their probably higher tier systems, there isn't any little heat sinks inside here, and we'll get onto that later on, but just put a pin in that for me there in the background. So let's move those accessories out of the way. Inside, we have a ridiculously well-packed box. Luckily, my giant hands are able to take with one hand here, which is always good to hear. Inside, we've got large foam here, and again, I've mentioned it before, and I'll mention it again, that any device that arrives with a significant degree of protection in transit from like silent damage that can vary from shock damage to just motion damage in transit, I think I will always give a bit of credence and a bit of respect for that as someone that's worked in logistics for a long time before doing whatever you want to call this career. I think it's important when brands do that, because a lot of the time, if something's encased in cardboard, you're never going to know if there's damages in that when these things get shipped all the way around the world. So again, it's a corner cut, and do have a look at how some brands present some of their bigger and heavier units. If you've received something encased in cardboard, do wonder why that is. Now, we open this up from the plastic inside, and have a little look there. And there we have a lovely little 664 system here. I'm going to bring that closer to camera. The lighting is going to play with it there, as you can see all the way around. It's got that bit of film. We're not going to peel that film off. We'll save that for a little background stuff another time. But again, as a 6-bay, this is weirdly big and small at the same time. So again, a 6-bay NAS is always going to be quite big, and this is obviously clearly going to be bigger than the others. But for a 6-bay, just to put that into a little bit of perspective there, that is the size of my wallet, and that is the size of this NAS. So there's quite a significant difference there. And it's, you know, for a 6-bay, it's surprisingly compact. Ventilation-wise, I know in the previous generations, a few of you raised a query about how the system deals with active cooling in conjunction with fans. At the base of the system, we've got some added ventilation there. On the sides, we've got a side panel of ventilation there and a little bit there on the side, but it's pretty clear early doors. This is a system that's taking advantage of kind of that horizontal method of passive airflow with dual, I believe, 12mm fans there on the rear. I'll be honest, I haven't got a ruler on me. So before we go any further, let's talk a little bit about the internal hardware. But actually, do you know what? Let's get to the internal hardware later on. In fact, we'll grab ourselves a screwdriver and take this bad boy apart later. So to access the drive media inside, what we need to do is access the lock-in mechanism on the side. We click that down and boom, there is your front panel easily removed. There is your 6 bays of storage. Something else someone else did raise with me, does this system feature an LCD panel? I'm afraid it doesn't. This is another continuing release in the Prosumer SMB series where we're not seeing LCD panels. And I know a lot of you are quite disappointed by that because you can find that stuff from the individual IPs. So when the system's beeping, you can get a much faster response on finding out what's wrong with the system on the fly, but unfortunately that's not something this system has present. Again, the trays themselves, nice and easy, click and load. You remove the sides of these panels, you pop a drive inside. It really is that straightforward, and there are screw holes for the 2.5-inch media there to be used in the base too. If you have a little look, nice and close there. Again, if we remove all of these bays, we can have a little look on the inside of this system. Have a little look about how it looks inside. Let's have a little look. Maybe I'll cut this bit out, maybe I won't, I haven't decided yet. Let's have a little look, and inside there, so straight away we've got those 6, let's bring the light in there, we've got 6 SATA bays there at the back, no loose wires. It's not using separate data and power, which I would expect in 2022. Interestingly, we can see the memory module slots there on the side. If we bring that around so the light can see it in that side panel. The system arrives with 4 gig of DDR4 memory. We will take a close look at that later on, but it can be upgraded up to 16 gig, which is one of the earlier kind of improvements with this over its predecessor, which had an 8 gig limit. 16 gig to play with in a multi-user, multi-software, simultaneous setup is going to be very, very useful indeed. But apart from that, that's pretty much everything we know in terms of storage there. But of course, we are going to talk a little bit about SSD storage later on as well. Now, if we look at the rear of the device, we can see some nice impressive stuff vis-a-vis ports and connections. Now, there's a few things to take on board here that I'm going to skip over what you guys think is going to be the most interesting thing. And I'm going to talk about the thing that I find the most interesting, and it's USB. And I know I've lost about 70% of you, but stick with me. The system arrives with USB 3.2 Gen 2 ports. Now, this isn't the first time I've sung its praises, and indeed, on the front of the device, we've got another USB 3.2 Gen 2 port here at 10 gigabits per second. Now, why is that a big deal? Nice and simple. At 6 bays, even if you're using conventionally, and conventionally being an extension of the word here, conventionally available hard drives at like 2 to 4 TB, there's still a lot of storage. And having all of that data in one place is not a smart idea. So you're going to need to have an off-site backup. You're going to need to have maybe an in-house backup, maybe a cloud backup. But one of the easiest and most affordable means to have a backup is a USB backup. And if you are going to use a USB external system on USB 3.2 Gen 2, that's a lot of data to move back and forth. And having that much faster USB port there is going to alleviate a lot of those backups taking longer and longer and longer, whether that is a long-term connected USB that will be on a schedule or a USB drive that you are connecting, singular, RAID enabled or whatever, that you connect to the front and just click that button. And you guys know how much I love a USB one-touch copy button on any system there. So again, at the moment, they seem to be the only brand out there that are releasing systems with USB 3.2 Gen 2 ports, and I simply don't know why, because USB backups have always been a popular form, and although in most of my other releases I would have raked QNAP over the coals as I have in the past over the inclusion of USB 2 ports, or as I like to call them, Jurassic old style unnecessary ports, in this system it's okay because you've got the HDMI out there, so you can use it in a standalone surveillance setup or using it as a VM there or for multimedia purposes and all of that HD station stuff. And you've still got the two super fast ports. So in this scenario, having those two USB 2s for your KVM setup, keyboard, video, mouse, isn't the end of the world. And I think that's quite a nice advantage to have there. Next up, let's be honest, you want to talk about 2.5 gigabit Ethernet, and much like its predecessor in the D series, this system arrives with 2 times 2.5 GBE slots. So on the face of it, I can't really call that an upgrade over its predecessor, but I do think it is worth touching on, simply because right now 2.5 GBE is growing in popularity, and it is being integrated into a lot of hardware instead of 1 GBE, because the price point is now and near enough identical, be it routers at the ISP level, switches, and a lot of client hardware that you see knocking around. So having those two ports, particularly in conjunction with a 6-based system, are going to be saturated in a link aggregation or port trunked environment. But, of course, this little bad boy here at the top is another reason why that is going to be a point of interest for you. This PCIe slot here at the top, that we will go into a little bit more detail on in an upcoming video, is a PCIe 3x2 slot there. Now, that means you can attach cards in there up to a potential bandwidth of 2,000 megabytes per second, or 2 gigabyte even. So with that, you can add a dual port 10 GBE card. With that, you can attach a one port card or a combo card with SSD bays on top to attach even more storage. Now, conventional hard drives these days, depending on whether you go enterprise or not, will give you something like 160 to maybe 250 megabytes per second. Stick those in a RAID 5, RAID 6, or even RAID 0 environment if you're feeling dangerous, and you are going to be able to saturate 10 GBE and above relatively easily. Once you integrate SSDs into that makeup, suddenly the idea that down the line you can really max out that storage is going to be advantageous and is going to be something you'll want to take advantage of. But for now, what I'm going to do is get this lid off of here and talk a little bit about the internal hardware of this system. Sorry, just had to get my special screwdriver. We'll get that out of there. The outside of the device is attached by 4 screws all the way around the edge of the chassis. Remove those out of there. Again, you almost certainly will not need to do this unless you're planning some more large-scale upgrades. Again, the memory slots inside are accessible from within inside the bays. As an upgrade so far over the 653D, it's not a huge upgrade, but again, it comes down a lot of that to those upgrades in the bandwidth and what that CPU brings. And also, given from what I understand, the price tag being not dissimilar, maybe even a similar level to that of the 653D, it means that any advantages you're getting aren't arriving at any increase in price. So if you're already utilising the 653D, you may be not really thinking about going for this as an upgrade. But if you're a user that has yet to buy kind of a mid-range 6-bay, this may be an interesting development for you. There we go. Maybe that plastic should have come off in the end. That's a horrible noise, wasn't it? Let's get that out of there. There is our side panel off of there. Again, it is a plastic chassis. Again, there are advantages or disadvantages to that. I know a lot of enterprise users don't really like plastic chassis, but it has to be said they do run quieter and they do keep the cost down. So there's pros and there's cons. We have a little look on the inside of this system. We can look at a couple of neat little things inside there. So the first thing I want you to look at there, just at the back, if we get that lighting right there, and there will be images there on NAS Compares linked in the description, we've got a large black heatsink here at the top. Now, that's important for a couple of reasons. First and foremost, that's obviously where the CPU lives, that CPU being the Intel Celeron N5105 or the N5095. And that CPU has one of the largest heatsinks that I've seen on a QNAP SMB system. Normally the heatsink they use wouldn't be quite as big as that, and these Celeron processors, they're quite efficient, but they can run a little hot. So that's a nice little upgrade from them over the predecessor, not just utilising a better generation CPU. The previous generation was taking advantage of the J4125 CPU benchmark score of 3005, 3006 on CPU benchmark there, and the new CPU taking advantage of 4000 has a score of 4161. And yes, I read that off the notes. I'm not actually that cool. So inside we've got the memory modules inside there. So if we have a quick little gander, we can have a little look. Previous unit, I believe, was using A data memory inside there. So we have a little look, and we are still using A data memory inside there. This is DDR4 2666 megahertz memory, which is quite pleasing to see. I didn't expect it to be ECC. You would not get ECC memory in a system architecture like this at this price point, but it's still nice to see that there. But the other really cool thing, if we have a little look there, you can see just around the memory are our two M2 NVMe slots there. This system arrives, while I've taken it apart and leaving it on the table, it arrives with two M2 NVMe SSD caching bays or raw storage bays. Now, those bays are NVMe based. They do take advantage of PCIe Gen 3 x 1, something we will talk about in just a moment. But that means that this 6-bay system also has the benefit of having a potential much faster SSD pool being built there into the side. Now you can use that for cache, you can use it for Q tier, which kind of combines everything and creates an intelligent mix of them where files go to the right destinations. Or again, you can take advantage of the PCIe slot to add even further NVMe SSD bays there inside. So again, huge potential there in terms of storage for the system both on day one and moving forward. However, that NVMe being PCIe Gen 3 x 1, I think that is another example of this CPU, its PCI lanes, its chipset, whatever you want to call it, being spread so far out, because those slots, it means regardless of the SSD you're going to put in there, you're going to be capped at 1,000 megs on those. So yes, you can put in, Gen 3s or Gen 4s in there, which are in of themselves capable of much higher. In this system, however, you're still only going to get 1,000 megs out of each of those bays, and you can RAID them together to circumnavigate that. But I'm glad they're there. It's just worth remembering that they are going to be lower bandwidth than traditionally the bays you may find in your desktop PC. Now, I'm not really going to critique them for it, because this system having those bays at all and having a PCIe upgrade slot at 3x2 and having 2.5 gigabit Ethernet there on the rear and having USB 3.2 Gen 2 there as well, all rolled into this system while still being on a 6-bay, which is already going to have its impact on the chipset, means for me that it's still one of the best examples of a 6-bay right now. Now, this has been a hardware review. We've got the software overview for this system coming very soon. But if I had to say what I like and what I don't like about this device, I think I've been pretty clear what I like. I like the new CPU. I like the fact this can go up to 16 gig of memory. I like the SSD slots. I like PCI upgradability. I like that this system can be expanded in so many ways. I didn't even talk about USB expansions. There's a range of 2, 4, 6, 8, even I believe 12-bay expansion systems in the TL and TR series for it. What do I not like about it? I think the chassis is going to divide opinion, certainly. I think it's one of these I think people will like the kind of industrial, the 72 series and stuff like that. It's got a bit of meat to it. I also think maybe QNAP could be a little clearer about those PCIe lanes. I know it's in the specification sheets and they have raised this point, at least on the data sheet level, but I don't think they're talking loudly enough about it, and they can talk about SSD compatibility and PCIe upgrade compatibility, but maybe just a little bit more detail on how the performance of those ports actually can relay in reality. It's still great to have them, and you're still getting a system that has more ways to upgrade than its predecessor at practically the same price point, but those upgrades do arrive with caveats because of the architecture. And of course, I do quite like that it's 2600 memory and not the 2400 of its predecessor. But this has been my unboxing and literal teardown of the TS-664 NAS system. If you've enjoyed the video, click like. It helps me know what I'm doing right, so it makes each video better than the last. Click subscribe as we go through all of these different releases for QNAP throughout this year. Of course, if you're still on the fence about the solution you want to buy that you need for your personal setup, take advantage of the free advice section in the comments. Hiring a techie for your storage or networking can be expensive. It is genuinely a free advice section down there. We will offer our advice. It might take us an extra day or so to answer you because we do have lives and we have other things to do like a video every day. But we try to answer every single email and we will give you free impartial advice. There's donate buttons, use them, ignore them, it's your call, but ultimately it's there if you need it. But otherwise, I'll see you next time.